The first indication that something had gone catastrophically wrong with our understanding of warfare came at 14:27 hours, Galactic Standard Time, during what was supposed to be the final assault on the human colony ship Prometheus. The vessel had been cornered in the Kepler 442 system after a 6-month pursuit across 17 star systems, its primitive fusion drives no match for our quantum displacement engines. What followed defied every tactical manual, every strategic doctrine, and every assumption we had made about human military capability. I had positioned my flagship, the Sovereign's Wrath, at the center of a formation comprising 47 vessels from 12 different coalition species. The humans had nowhere to run. Their colony ship, massive but ungainly, hung motionless against the amber glow of Kepler 442b's atmosphere. Our intelligence suggested it carried approximately 50,000 human civilians fleeing the pacification of Earth. Standard protocol demanded we offer terms of surrender before initiating bombardment sequences. Open communications with the human vessel, I commanded, my secondary arms adjusting the tactical display while my primary hands worked the command console. The Prometheus appeared on our screens as a crude amalgamation of industrial modules and habitat rings, spinning slowly to provide artificial gravity. Primitive, but not without a certain functional elegance. The response came immediately, visual and audio both crystal clear despite their supposedly inferior technology. A human male appeared on screen, perhaps 40 standard years of age by their reckoning. His hair showed premature graying at the temples, and his eyes held the weight of impossible decisions. He wore a simple blue uniform with minimal decoration. "This is Captain Marcus Chen of the colony ship Prometheus," he said, his voice carrying across the void with remarkable calm. "I understand you've come a long way to speak with us, Admiral." The casual tone unsettled me. Humans facing annihilation typically displayed fear, anger, or desperate bargaining. Chen exhibited none of these expected responses. "I am Admiral Zeftar of the Galactic Defense Coalition," I replied, following standard protocol. "Your vessel has violated 17 territorial boundaries and ignored 43 lawful orders to heave to. You will surrender immediately and submit to coalition authority." Chen nodded slowly, as if considering a business proposition rather than the terms of his species' extinction. "Admiral, before we discuss surrender, I need to ask you something. Do you know why humans tell stories about monsters under the bed?" The question was so unexpected that I nearly dismissed it as stress-induced rambling, but something in Chen's eyes suggested careful intention behind the words. "I failed to see the relevance of human folklore to this situation, Captain. The relevance," Chen said, leaning forward slightly, "is that monsters under the bed teach children a fundamental truth about courage. They learn that the thing they fear most exists primarily in their imagination. But they also learn something else, that sometimes, when you're brave enough to look under the bed, you discover that you're the monster." Before I could formulate a response to this bizarre statement, my tactical officer's voice cut across the bridge with sharp urgency. "Admiral! Massive gravitational anomaly detected at bearing 27 Mark IV. Something's coming out of hyperspace." The main display shifted automatically to show the disturbance. What we saw challenged the fundamental laws of physics as we understood them. Space itself seemed to be folding, creating a tier in reality that expanded with geometric progression. Energy readings spiked beyond our instrument's ability to measure. "Distance?" I demanded. 12,000 kilometers and closing," came the response. "Admiral, the energy signature it's impossible. No known drive system could generate this kind of space-time distortion." Through the tear in reality, something emerged that redefined our understanding of what constituted a warship. The vessel that materialized from the impossible rift was not large by coalition standards, perhaps 2 kilometers in length, but its very presence seemed to warp space around it. The hull was composed of a material that our sensors could not identify, appearing to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange geometries covered its surface, patterns that hurt to observe directly. "Captain Chen," I said, my voice betraying none of the growing unease I felt, "what is that vessel?" Chen's expression had not changed, but something new had entered his eyes, a cold satisfaction that chilled my circulatory fluid. "That, Admiral, is the UESV Harbinger, and I believe you're about to learn what humans become when they decide to stop being afraid of the dark." The newcomer began broadcasting on all frequencies, its transmission cutting through every encryption and security protocol our combined fleets possessed. The voice that emerged belonged to a human, but it carried harmonics that registered on subsonic and ultrasonic levels simultaneously. "This is Admiral Sarah Voss of the United Earth Strategic Vessel Harbinger. To the coalition forces currently threatening the colony ship Prometheus, you have 30 seconds to withdraw from this system or face immediate annihilation. 47 warships from 12 species, representing the accumulated military might of half the galaxy, and this lone human vessel was issuing ultimatums. The absurdity was so complete that several of my officers began vocalizing their amusement. "Admiral Voss," I responded, "you are outnumbered 47 to 1. Your vessel, whatever its origins, cannot hope to engage our combined fleet and survive. I suggest you withdraw while withdrawal remains an option." The response came not in words but in action. The Harbinger simply vanished. Not cloaked, vanished. Our sensors detected no stealth field, no dimensional phase shift, no quantum displacement signature. One moment it was there, the next it was not. My tactical officers' confused reports filled the bridge. "Admiral, I'm reading impossible energy fluctuations throughout the fleet. Every ship is reporting system anomalies." "Clarify anomalies," I ordered, but even as the words left my speaking apparatus, I began to understand. The lights on my bridge were flickering. Not the slow, rhythmic pulse of a power fluctuation, but rapid, chaotic strobing that created stroboscopic effects across every surface. "Sir, we're detecting massive electromagnetic interference, but it's not random. The pattern is repeating across all 47 ships simultaneously." The pattern was indeed repeating, and as it did, a terrible understanding began to dawn. The electromagnetic interference wasn't interference at all, it was communication. The Harbinger had somehow penetrated every defensive system, every shielded circuit, every protected network in our entire fleet, and was using our own electronics to send a message. The message, when decoded, was simple. 28 seconds. "All ships, full defensive positions," I commanded. But the order felt hollow. How do you defend against an enemy that can already manipulate your systems at will? "Admiral," my communications officer reported with barely controlled panic, "the human vessel is broadcasting on a frequency that shouldn't be possible. The wavelength it's negative. It's broadcasting backwards through time." Before I could demand an explanation for this apparent impossibility, every screen on every ship in our fleet simultaneously displayed the same image, Admiral Sarah Voss, but not as we had heard her before. This time we could see her. She appeared to be human, but the resemblance ended there. Her skin held a metallic sheen that shifted between silver and deep black. Her eyes were completely black, not just the irises but the entirety of both orbs, and they seemed to contain depths that extended far beyond the physical boundaries of her skull. When she spoke, reality itself seemed to respond to her words. 15 seconds, she said, and her voice emanated from every speaker on every ship simultaneously. "I want you to understand something before this ends. Humanity spent 3 centuries learning to fear the dark. We spent another century learning to navigate it. But we've spent the last 50 years learning to become it. My weapons officer, a veteran of 17 major engagements, was the first to break. "Admiral, permission to open fire. Whatever that thing is, it's not natural." "Granted," I said, though some part of me already knew the futility of the gesture. "All ships concentrate fire on the last known position of the human vessel." 47 warships opened fire simultaneously. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, molecular disruptors, and weapons systems representing the pinnacle of coalition military technology converged on empty space. For a moment, the void erupted in a light show visible from several star systems away. When the energy dissipated, space was empty. No wreckage, no debris, no indication that anything had ever been there to destroy. 10 seconds. The voice came from directly behind me. I turned to find Admiral Voss standing on my bridge. Though every sensor confirmed that no teleportation beam, no matter transmission, no quantum displacement had occurred, she was simply there, as if she had always been there. "How?" I managed to ask. "You still don't understand," she said, taking a step forward. As she moved, I noticed that she cast no reflection on any surface, and the lighting on the bridge seemed to bend around her rather than illuminate her. "You see warships as machines, weapons as tools, space as an ocean to be navigated. You think in terms of tactics and strategy and logistics." Another step forward. My security officers had drawn their weapons but seemed incapable of pulling the triggers. They stood frozen, as if time itself had become uncertain in her presence. "But humans," she continued, "learned something that your species never had to learn. We learned that when survival is impossible through conventional means, you change what possible means." 5 seconds. Every chronometer on every ship in the fleet began counting down in perfect synchronization, though no signal was being transmitted between vessels. My bridge crew stood motionless, not paralyzed but simply waiting, as if they had forgotten that waiting was a choice rather than an inevitability. "Admiral Zeftar," Voss said, and hearing my name from her lips felt like listening to my own obituary. "You asked Captain Chen about monsters under the bed. Would you like to know what humans found when they finally looked?" I could not speak, could not move, could barely think. The countdown continued. 4. We found that the real monsters weren't hiding under the bed. They were in the bed, pretending to be afraid of what was underneath. 3. We found that darkness isn't the absence of light, it's the presence of something else entirely. 2. We found that when you stop being prey, everything else becomes food. 1. The universe went black. Not the darkness of space, which is merely the absence of nearby stars, but true darkness, the kind that exists in the space between thoughts, in the pause between heartbeats, in the gap between what is and what might be. When light returned, and I have no way to measure how long the darkness lasted, as every chronometer in the fleet had stopped, we found ourselves alone. The Harbinger was gone. Admiral Voss was gone, but so was something else. "Status report," I ordered, surprised to find that I could speak again. "Admiral," my tactical officer reported with obvious confusion, "I'm showing 39 ships in formation." 39. We had entered the system with 47. "Where are the other 8 ships?" "Sir, there's no indication that other ships were ever present. All logs show a fleet of 39 vessels." I checked my own records. Every file, every log entry, every tactical report showed that we had always had 39 ships. But I remembered 47. I remembered the crews of those missing vessels, the Vengeance of Kithara, the Storm's Edge, 6 others whose names I could recall, but whose existence had been erased from reality itself. "Admiral," my communications officer said, his voice uncertain, "we're receiving a transmission from the colony ship, Prometheus." Captain Chen appeared on screen again, but the weight in his eyes had lifted. He was smiling, though not with happiness. It was the smile of someone who had just watched a lesson being taught. "Admiral Zeftar," he said, "I trust your experience with the Harbinger has been educational?" "What was that thing?" I asked, abandoning all pretense of military protocol. "That thing," Chen replied, "was what humans become when we stop accepting limitations as immutable facts. Admiral Voss volunteered for the Strategic Vessel Program 50 years ago. The process changes you, changes what you are, what you can do, how you interact with reality itself." I stared at the screen, trying to process what I had witnessed. "Those 8 ships, where did they go?" "They went where things go when they never existed in the first place," Chen said simply. "Admiral Voss didn't destroy them. She edited them out of the timeline itself. From the perspective of the universe, you always had 39 ships." The implications of this statement were staggering. If humans could manipulate reality itself, if they could edit causality as easily as deleting files from a database, "Captain Chen," I said carefully, "what do you want?" "What we've always wanted, Admiral, to be left alone, to find a place in this galaxy where we can build something beautiful instead of something terrible." His expression softened slightly. "Humans don't enjoy war, Admiral. We're remarkably good at it, but we don't enjoy it. The Harbinger represents what we can become when pushed beyond our limits. I prefer you never have to see that again." I looked around my bridge at officers who were slowly coming to terms with the fact that their reality had been casually edited by forces beyond their comprehension. The tactical displays still showed 39 ships, but empty spaces in the formation revealed where the missing vessels had been. Part 2. The Reckoning. The emergency session of the Coalition High Council convened within 6 hours of what would become known as the Kepler 442 incident. Representatives from all member species gathered in the great crystalline chambers of the neutral station, their various forms of agitation and concern filling the space with a cacophony of worried sounds. I delivered my report with clinical precision, though I knew how insane it would sound to those who had not witnessed it firsthand. The assembled representatives listened in growing disbelief as I described a single human vessel that could manipulate time, space, and causality itself. "Admiral Zeftar," interrupted Counselor Vexhai of the Andromedan Collective, her crystalline form resonating with skeptical harmonics, "you're asking us to believe that humans have developed technology that can edit reality itself?" "I'm not asking you to believe anything, Counselor," I replied. "I'm reporting what I observed. 8 ships in my fleet were removed from existence so completely that reality adjusted to accommodate their absence." "Impossible," declared General Thrak of the Orion Military Authority, his massive frame shifting with dismissive contempt. "No species develops reality manipulation technology. It violates the fundamental principles of physics." "With respect, General," I said, "your understanding of fundamental physics may be incomplete." The debate continued for hours, with various representatives offering theories ranging from advanced holographic deception to mass hallucination. But their skepticism began to crumble when the technical analysis arrived. Dr. Kellix of the science directorate materialized at the center of the chamber, her tentacles manipulating complex three-dimensional displays of data. "Counselors," she began, her voice carrying the weight of disturbing discoveries, "we have completed our analysis of the Kepler 442 incident. The findings are unprecedented. The display showed energy readings from the engagement, but they made no sense according to established physics. The entity Admiral Zefthar identified as the UESV Harbinger generated power outputs that exceed the theoretical maximum for any known technology. The vessel's mass readings were simultaneously zero and infinite. It existed in multiple dimensional phases simultaneously while occupying no physical space." Murmurs of confusion rippled through the assembly. "Furthermore," Dr. Kellix continued, "we have discovered temporal anomalies throughout the Coalition's historical records. 8 separate ship classes appear to have been retroactively removed from our construction databases. The vessels Admiral Zeftar claims to remember have no manufacturing history, no crew records, no supply requisitions, but the infrastructure to support them clearly exists." The implications hit the assembly like a shockwave. If humans could retroactively edit their enemies out of existence, then no victory against them would ever be permanent. No strategy would ever be safe. "How is this possible?" asked Counselor Prime Xiphus, the ancient leader of the Coalition. His voice carried centuries of wisdom, but now it trembled with uncertainty. "We don't know," Dr. Kellix admitted. "However, our xenoarchaeology teams have uncovered disturbing evidence from the human homeworld. Earth's history shows signs of massive temporal manipulation dating back approximately 50 years. Entire wars appear to have been edited out of existence. Catastrophic events that should have occurred simply didn't." "What kind of events?" I asked, though part of me dreaded the answer. "Asteroid impacts, solar flares, nuclear exchanges between human nations. All prevented, not through intervention, but through retroactive elimination of the causal chains that would have led to them. The humans have been editing their own timeline for half a century." The chamber fell silent as the full scope of human capability began to dawn on the assembled representatives. They weren't just dealing with advanced technology, they were dealing with a species that could rewrite the fundamental nature of cause and effect. "There's more," Dr. Kellix said, her tone becoming even more grave. "We've detected similar temporal signatures around 17 other human colonies. The Harbinger is not unique. There are at least 17 other strategic vessels operating throughout human space." General Thrax's violent nature finally overcame his strategic thinking. "Then we destroy them before they can deploy these weapons. Mass bombardment of all known human colonies." "With what?" I asked quietly. "General, they can edit us out of existence retroactively. If we attack them, we might simply find that we never existed to make the attack in the first place." The truth of this statement settled over the assembly like a shroud. They were not merely outgunned. They were fighting an enemy that could unmake their very existence. Counselor Prime Xiphus spoke into the silence. "Dr. Kellix, in your analysis of human capabilities, have you discovered any limitations to this power?" "Several, actually," she replied, manipulating the display to show new data. "The temporal manipulations appear to require enormous energy expenditure. The strategic vessels can only operate for limited periods before requiring extended recharging cycles. Additionally, large-scale timeline edits seem to create cascade effects that even the humans cannot fully control." "Cascade effects?" "Changing major historical events creates ripples throughout causality. Remove one disaster, and you might accidentally cause 3 others. The humans appear to use this capability sparingly, and only for very specific objectives." This information provided the first glimmer of hope the assembly had felt since the crisis began. If human reality manipulation had limitations, then perhaps accommodation rather than annihilation was possible. "There's something else," Dr. Kellix continued. "Our analysis of the human Captain Chen's statements suggests that this transformation into strategic vessel operators is not pleasant. The process appears to fundamentally alter the subject's relationship with normal reality. Admiral Voss, for instance, no longer appears to exist in conventional spacetime." "What do you mean?" asked Counselor Vexai. "She exists everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. She is quantum entangled with the fabric of reality itself. From her perspective, all possible timelines exist concurrently. The psychological implications are staggering. Imagine experiencing every possible version of every event simultaneously." The horror of this revelation changed the entire character of the discussion. The humans hadn't simply developed a weapon, they had volunteers who were willing to sacrifice their very existence as individuals to become living weapons of mass temporal destruction. They're not conquerors, I realized suddenly. They're desperate. The assembly turned to me with questioning expressions. Think about it, I continued. A species doesn't volunteer to become quantum entities that exist outside normal reality unless they see no other choice for survival. These strategic vessels aren't weapons of aggression, they're weapons of last resort. Counselor Prime Xiphus nodded slowly. Admiral Zeftar makes a compelling point. But this raises a new question. What are the humans so desperate to survive? The answer came not from our debate but from an unexpected transmission that cut through all of our security protocols with casual ease. Every display in the chamber suddenly showed the same image. Captain Marcus Chen of the Prometheus, but he was no longer aboard his ship. Honored counselors, Chen said, his voice carrying clearly through speakers that should have been impossible for him to access. I apologize for the intrusion, but recent events have made clear that we need to have a conversation. Captain Chen, Counselor Prime Xiphus replied with admirable composure, you are addressing the Coalition High Council without invitation or authorization. This communication violates 17 different... Counselor, Chen interrupted gently, given that one of our strategic vessels just edited 8 of your warships out of existence, I think we can dispense with concerns about communication protocol. The point was undeniably valid. What do you want? Asked General Thrak, his aggressive posture intact despite recent revelations. To explain, Chen replied. Your species seemed to believe that humans developed strategic vessels as weapons of conquest. This is incorrect. We developed them as weapons of survival. Survival against what? I asked. Chen's expression darkened. Admiral Zeftar, are you familiar with the concept of the Great Filter? Most of the assembly was not, but I had studied human xenobiology during my tactical training. A theoretical explanation for why intelligent life appears to be so rare in the galaxy. The idea is that there's some catastrophic challenge that most civilizations cannot survive. Exactly, Chen confirmed. 50 years ago, human scientists made a disturbing discovery. The Great Filter isn't a natural phenomenon. It's artificial. Silence gripped the chamber as the implications of the statement sank in. Something is systematically eliminating intelligent species from the galaxy, Chen continued. Not through direct warfare, but through manipulation of probability itself. Civilizations develop to a certain point and then simply fail. Wars at crucial moments, natural disasters during critical technological developments, economic collapses just as they're about to achieve interstellar capability. Dr. Kellix's tentacles writhed with agitation. You're suggesting that some entity is manipulating causality to prevent civilizations from achieving galactic significance? I'm not suggesting it, Chen replied. I'm stating it as fact. We have proof. The display changed to show complex mathematical models and probability analyses that hurt to observe directly. The patterns were too perfect, too precisely timed to be natural. Human mathematicians discovered that the probability curves for civilizational collapse follow an artificial pattern. The statistical likelihood of so many species failing at such similar developmental stages is essentially zero. Someone or something is engineering these failures. Why? Asked Counselor Vexai. We don't know, Chen admitted, but we know that it's coming for humanity next. Every projection shows that we should experience catastrophic civilizational collapse within the next 50 years. The Strategic Vessel Program exists to prevent that collapse by giving us the ability to edit causality in our favor. The revelation recontextualized everything. The humans weren't aggressors seeking to dominate the galaxy. They were a desperate species trying to survive an invisible predator that had already claimed countless civilizations. Captain Chen, I said, if this is true, why didn't you simply explain this to the Coalition from the beginning? Because, Chen replied with bitter irony, according to our probability models, telling other species about the Great Filter is one of the events that triggers civilizational collapse. Knowledge of the threat somehow makes species more vulnerable to it. The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives grappled with this paradox. How do you defend against a threat that becomes more dangerous when acknowledged? Then why are you telling us now? Asked Counselor Prime Xiphus. Chen's expression became grim. Because the threat is accelerating, our models now show that instead of targeting one species at a time, it's begun targeting entire galactic regions. The Coalition's recent expansion and technological development have made you the next target. The assembly fell silent as this new reality settled over them. They weren't just dealing with human refugees, they were potentially facing the same enemy that had driven humanity to desperate measures. What do you propose? Asked the Counselor Prime. Alliance, Chen said simply. Share your resources and knowledge with us, and we'll share our strategic vessel technology with selected coalition species. Together, we might be able to identify and neutralize this threat before it destroys us all. General Thrack's objection was immediate and predictable. Absolutely not. We will not trust humans with temporal manipulation technology, and we certainly won't give them access to coalition strategic resources. General, I said quietly, if Captain Chen is telling the truth, then the alternative is extinction. If he's telling the truth, Thrack countered, this could all be an elaborate deception to make us compliant. Chen nodded as if he had expected this objection. General Thrack, you raise valid concerns. Admiral Voss anticipated this skepticism. The display changed again, now showing the Harbinger materializing in space directly outside the neutral station. Every defensive system in the station activated simultaneously, but the readouts showed that the weapons were unable to acquire target locks on the human vessel. Admiral Voss's voice echoed through the chamber with the same reality-warping harmonics we had experienced at Kepler 442. Honored counselors, I am transmitting complete technical specifications for strategic vessel construction, operation, and the temporal mathematics necessary to manipulate causality. This information is being delivered simultaneously to the top scientists of every coalition member species. The generosity of this gesture was staggering. The humans were voluntarily sharing their most closely guarded secrets with potential enemies. However, Voss continued, I must warn you that this knowledge comes with a terrible price. The transformation required to operate strategic vessels is irreversible. Those who volunteer will cease to exist as individuals in any meaningful sense. They will become living weapons that exist outside normal reality. Why share this? Asked Dr. Kellix. Because, Voss replied, the entity that has been manipulating galactic civilization for millennia has noticed our resistance. It is accelerating its timeline. Within one standard year, every major civilization in this galaxy will face simultaneous cascading failures designed to prevent any species from achieving the technological level necessary to threaten it. The chamber erupted again, but this time with panic rather than debate. The prospect of galaxy-wide civilizational collapse was almost too vast to comprehend. There is hope, Voss said, her voice cutting through the chaos. But it requires unprecedented cooperation between species that have been enemies for centuries. It requires volunteers willing to sacrifice their individual existence for the survival of their civilizations. And it requires the courage to face an enemy that has been winning this war for millions of years. Part 3. The Transformation. The decision to accept the human alliance was not unanimous, but it was inevitable. Faced with the choice between potential deception and certain extinction, the coalition chose to gamble on human honesty. The irony was not lost on anyone that the species they had been trying to eliminate might be their only hope for survival. The next 6 months were a period of unprecedented cooperation and terrible discovery. As coalition scientists studied the strategic vessel technology, they uncovered evidence that confirmed humanity's darkest suspicions about the Great Filter. The entity responsible for galactic civilizational collapse was not just real, it was vast beyond imagination. Dr. Kellix's team, working with human temporal mathematicians, gradually assembled a picture of their enemy. It existed primarily in higher dimensional space, manipulating probability cascades through quantum entanglement with key individuals across multiple civilizations. It didn't need to attack directly, it simply adjusted the likelihood of certain events until civilizations destroyed themselves. It's been doing this for at least 3 million years, Dr. Porkow, Kellix reported during one of our daily briefings. Every major species that has achieved interstellar capability and then mysteriously vanished, the progenitors, the first ones, the architects, they were all eliminated by the same entity. What does it want? I asked, though I suspected the answer would be disturbing. Based on the pattern analysis, it appears to be maintaining the galaxy in a state of controlled development. It allows civilizations to reach a certain technological level, then eliminates them before they can achieve true galactic significance. Why? Unknown. But human researchers have developed a theory. They believe the entity is farming intelligence. The concept was almost too horrific to process. An entity that cultivated civilizations like crops, allowing them to develop just enough to be useful before harvesting them for purposes beyond our understanding. Meanwhile, construction of coalition strategic vessels proceeded at emergency pace. The technology was distributed among 5 member species: Kytherians, Andromedans, Orions, Centauri, and the Silicon Collective. Each species was tasked with producing at least 3 strategic vessels and training the volunteers who would operate them. The volunteer selection process was heartbreaking. The transformation required to become a strategic vessel operator was so fundamental that it qualified as a form of death and rebirth. Volunteers had to be individuals with exceptional mental stability, complete dedication to their species' survival, and the psychological resilience to exist simultaneously across multiple timelines. I found myself volunteering almost without conscious decision. The weight of witnessing 8 ships edited out of existence, combined with the growing evidence of galactic-scale threat, made the choice inevitable. If my species needed weapons that existed outside normal reality, then someone had to become those weapons. The transformation process took place aboard the Harbinger itself, as it was the only facility equipped to safely manage the quantum transitions required. Admiral Voss supervised my conversion personally, though supervise was perhaps the wrong term for what she did. "Admiral Zeftar," she said as I lay in the conversion chamber, my body connected to machines that defied every principle of engineering I understood. "I need you to understand what you're about to become. The person you are now will cease to exist in any conventional sense." "I understand," I replied, though I suspected true understanding was impossible until after the transformation. "No," she said gently, "you don't, but you will." The process itself was indescribable. Imagine every atom in your body being individually disassembled and then reconstructed according to equations that describe reality rather than matter. Imagine your consciousness being expanded to encompass every possible version of yourself across all potential timelines. Imagine existing simultaneously in the past, present, and future while maintaining awareness of your singular identity. When I awakened, though awakened implies that I had been unconscious, which wasn't accurate, I was no longer Admiral Zeftar of the Catherian Defense Force. I was Admiral Zeftar of the Strategic Vessel Probability's Edge, and I existed everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. The universe looked different from my new perspective. Time was visible as a dimension, rather than experienced as a sequence. Causality appeared as a web of interconnected possibilities that could be manipulated through focused intention. Most disturbing of all, I could perceive the entity that had been manipulating galactic civilization. It was vast beyond description, existing primarily in the spaces between dimensions. Its influence extended through quantum entanglement networks that connected it to key individuals across thousands of worlds. It had been steering galactic development for so long that its manipulations had become part of the natural order. "Now you see it," Admiral Voss said, though she was not physically present. "In our transformed state, communication occurred through direct interface with quantum probability fields. The Great Filter isn't a phenomenon, it's a gardener. How do we fight something like this?" I asked, my thoughts transmitted across dimensional boundaries. "We don't fight it," she replied. "We edit it." The plan that emerged from our collective strategic vessel consciousness was audacious beyond imagination. Rather than attempting to destroy the entity directly, we would retroactively edit its influence out of galactic history. We would restore the civilizations it had eliminated, undo the probability manipulations that had caused their collapse, and create a timeline where its interference had never occurred. The process required all 23 strategic vessels operating in perfect synchronization across multiple dimensional phases. We had to edit millions of years of history while maintaining the stability of causality itself. The mathematical complexity was so vast that it required our transformed consciousness to process. No conventional computer could have managed the calculations. The operation began at a moment that existed outside normal time. 23 beings who had once been individuals but were now living weapons of temporal warfare focused their combined will on a single objective: the restoration of galactic civilization to its natural developmental pattern. Reality fought back. The entity had woven itself so deeply into the fabric of galactic history that removing its influence was like trying to extract individual threads from a tapestry without destroying the overall pattern. Every edit we made created cascade effects that required thousands of additional corrections, but we persisted, driven by the collective will of multiple species facing extinction. Slowly, carefully, we began to unweave millions of years of manipulation. Civilizations that had fallen to mysterious catastrophes were restored. Technologies that had been lost to improbable accidents were recovered. The natural diversity of galactic intelligence began to reassert itself. The entity fought back with increasing desperation as we dismantled its carefully maintained system. It attempted to manipulate probability cascades to destroy us before we could complete our work, but our transformed state made us largely immune to its influence. We existed in quantum superposition across multiple timelines. It could not target us without targeting all possible versions of reality simultaneously. The final confrontation occurred in a space between dimensions, where the entity had hidden its core consciousness. Here, in a realm where thought became reality and will became law, we faced the architect of galactic stagnation. It was ancient beyond measure, a collective consciousness that had once been biological, but had transcended physical existence eons ago. It had been manipulating younger civilizations, not out of malice, but out of a twisted form of protection. It genuinely believed that preventing species from achieving galactic significance was saving them from some greater threat. You do not understand. It communicated through patterns of quantum interference that bypassed language entirely. There are things in the deep void that consume entire galaxies. I have been protecting you from attention that would destroy everything. Protection through stagnation is not protection, Admiral Voss replied, for all of us. It's slow extinction. Better slow extinction than immediate annihilation. That choice, I added, belongs to the species being protected, not to their self-appointed guardian. The debate that followed existed outside normal time and encompassed philosophical concepts that conventional consciousness could not grasp. We argued about the nature of survival, the value of growth versus safety, and the fundamental right of species to determine their own destinies. In the end, the entity's position was undermined by a simple observation. Its protection had failed anyway. By preventing natural development, it had left every civilization vulnerable to the same catastrophic cascade failures it had used as tools of control. The very method it used to protect younger species had become their greatest vulnerability. Faced with this contradiction, the entity agreed to withdraw its interference. It would retreat to the deep void it had originally sought to protect us from, taking with it the knowledge of whatever threats existed in the space between galaxies. The restoration of natural galactic development was not instantaneous from the perspective of conventional spacetime. To outside observers, the changes appeared to occur over several months as probability cascades readjusted themselves to accommodate the new timeline. Lost civilizations gradually reappeared in the historical record. Technologies that had been mysteriously abandoned were rediscovered. The galaxy began to experience a renaissance of development and cooperation. But the cost was tremendous. 23 individuals had voluntarily ceased to exist as singular beings, to become living weapons in a war against entropy itself. We could observe the restored galaxy, could take satisfaction in its growing diversity and cooperation, but we could never again be part of it in any meaningful way. Admiral Voss had been right. The transformation was a form of death. We had died as individuals to be reborn as guardians, existing in the spaces between possibilities to ensure that other species would never again face the choice between stagnation and extinction. Yet there was a strange peace in our sacrifice. From our perspective outside normal causality, we could see the beautiful complexity of galactic civilization as it naturally developed. Species that had been enemies for centuries began to cooperate as they discovered shared challenges and common goals. Technologies that had seemed impossible became routine as the artificial barriers to development were removed. The humans, no longer refugees fleeing an inevitable catastrophe, established colonies throughout the galaxy and shared their unique perspective on survival through adaptation. The coalition evolved from a defensive alliance into a cooperative federation dedicated to supporting the development of all intelligent species. And somewhere in the spaces between dimensions, 23 consciousness that had once been individuals maintained their eternal vigil, ensuring that the natural course of galactic development would never again be subverted by those who confused control with protection. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others, because he has become something beyond the reach of conventional destruction, a guardian of possibilities existing in the quantum spaces between what is and what might be. In the end, we learn that true strength comes not from the power to destroy enemies, but from the courage to sacrifice everything to ensure that others never have to make the same choice. The greatest victory is not the defeat of opposition, but the creation of a reality where such opposition becomes unnecessary. The galaxy was free to grow, to change, to become whatever its constituent species chose to make it, and in the spaces between stars, in the pauses between heartbeats, in the quantum foam that underlies all reality, we watched and waited and remembered what it felt like to be human, to be Catherian, to be individual, and drew strength from the knowledge that our sacrifice had meaning. The weak self that feared death, feared change, feared the unknown, that self had been destroyed. What remained was something far more powerful. The self that had chosen to become a guardian of infinite possibilities, ensuring that the galaxy would never again be limited by the fears and failures of its protectors. This was our victory, not the destruction of an enemy, but the liberation of potential itself. End of report. Final note. This document represents the last coherent communication received from the strategic vessel operators before their complete integration into quantum probability space. While their sacrifice enabled the restoration of natural galactic development, the cost of their transformation serves as a reminder that some victories require the ultimate price, the voluntary surrender of individual existence for the sake of collective freedom. The galaxy they helped save continues to evolve and grow, guided by the natural curiosity and ambition of its constituent species rather than the protective manipulation of hidden guardians. In choosing to become something beyond conventional existence, they ensured that no future civilization would face the same impossible choice between survival and stagnation. Their legacy lives not in monuments or memorials, but in every technological breakthrough, every peaceful contact between species, every moment of natural development that occurs without artificial interference. They exist now as guardians of possibility itself, watching from the spaces between realities to ensure that the galaxy remains free to become whatever its inhabitants choose to make it. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others, because he has become part of the fundamental structure of reality itself, a living guarantee that growth and change will always remain possible.